Birds, people, and the dogs that bring them together. This is episode number 6. My name is Bill, and you're tied to the Woe Post. You know, it's not easy to start a podcast, and I never thought that I would reach this much success early on. But at the time of recording, we've had almost 500 downloads over 12 countries and in over 190 different cities. I want to thank all the guests that I've had on the podcast so far, all the folks who shared my posts on social media, and everybody that's provided advice and feedback on content, length, and where I should go from here. I truly appreciate all of your support, and I couldn't have done this without you. If you'd like to continue to support the Woe Post podcast, you can become a patron at patreon.com/thewoepost. As always, you can contact me on Facebook or Instagram at the Woe Post, or you can email me, bill@thewoepost.com. In the past, it would take breeders years, sometimes, to determine if a dog was actually breeding quality. And sometimes we might not even know that a dog carried a recessive gene for an undesirable health trait until perhaps generations later when it manifested in a descendant of that dog. But now, as early as 6 weeks old, we can test the dog for health issues to determine whether or not that dog is quality breeding stock. Thanks to Embark's Breed Plus Health Test, breeders have an ability to make their selective breeding process even better. If you'd like to learn more, I have an affiliate link in the description. Today, we're talking to lifelong hunter, NAVHDA Invitational Judge, former Director of Publications, 3-time versatile champion handler, and now NAVHDA President, Mr. Tim Otto. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great, Bill. Thanks. And I want to say thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it, Mr. President.
Yeah,
Right.
Thank you.
So I like to start every podcast off with a quick lightning round of 3 questions. You can just answer the questions as quickly as you can and try to keep it G-rated. First question, what is your favorite bird to hunt?
Sharptail.
Sharptail. Why is that?
You know, I really can't describe it. I mean, I love the terrain. I don't know. I just had a couple really, really, really wonderful days sharptail hunting, and they've always stuck with me. And I like all bird hunting, obviously, but if I had to choose one, and it's hard, if I had to choose one, I'd choose sharptail.
So I agree. I'm a sharptail guy too. I don't get out for them too much, but I think pretty good dog work on sharptails. In my experience, I haven't had them run too far or anything like that. I like the popcorn flushes that you get out of sharptail from time to time. That can be pretty exciting.
Yeah, reload quick.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you on the terrain. You know, I enjoy getting in grouse country, but I think the sharptail hunting just a good, fun hunt.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite training book?
Holy cow. The Green Book, you know, has a lot of good, but not the Green Book, a lot of good stuff in there. You know, a lot of it's sort of outdated. Bob Ferris's book, Training, I forget the title exactly, but Training the Versatile Hunting Dog or something, is very good. And to be honest, I read a lot of books by retriever guys. I can't pick out a title right now. But yeah, I'd have to go with the Green Book and a couple books by retriever guys.
Right on. Well, the old faithful Green Book, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and Bob Ferris's book too is very good.
Okay, and last one, what's your favorite podcast?
Yours. No, I like GDIY. I listen to that. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts that are totally unrelated to hunting as well. But if I had to choose one that was related to you know, upland hunting and what we do, I'd probably go with GDIY.
What non-hunting related ones do you listen to?
I listen to a lot of cooking podcasts and travel, you know, international travel, international cuisine podcasts. Just sort of an interest of mine.
Right on. Well, that's not completely unrelated to hunting because you got to do something with your harvest, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Tim Otto, the NAVHDA President. So you've been doing this for a while.
I've been involved in NAVHDA for, I'm going to say 24, maybe 25 years. and it's been a great ride. It's been a real journey. I've always had hunting dogs my whole life. Literally from the day I was born, we had hunting dogs in the house. Started with beagles, went to Irish setters for a while. We didn't do a lot of hunting as a kid, but when I did go hunt, my uncle had lived on a corn farm, a corn farm. And so I would go out with my cousin, and he had a dog. It was looked something like a short hair. I'm sure it was a mixed breed. And we'd go out with the dog, and the dog would be busting birds, and we shoot him. And I had a ball, and I had no idea there was this world out there where people had dogs that were trained to be steady to wing, shot, fall, retrieve the hand. That was just totally foreign concept to me, right? So I got my own personal first dog. I'm going to say 30, maybe 40 years ago, and it was an English pointer.
Okay.
And I was living in North Carolina. I didn't have any money, and I saw an ad in the paper: English pointers, $50 and $75, and I think I had like $56 in my pocket, right? So I went out. I said, "Cool, I can buy a dog and stop at McDonald's on the way home." So
There you go.
I went out, and anyway, to make a long story short, every dog I looked at, I said, "Well, I'll take that one." He goes, "No, that's $75." So I wound up borrowing some money and been getting one of the $75 dogs. I love the dog, beautiful point, beautiful run. But it was, again, this just shows how naive I was, right? I was buying field trial dogs that weren't for the foot hunter, right? This was a dog that you let it go and wasn't running away from me. You just wouldn't see it for 45 minutes, and it'd come check in and then go. So it was a great dog. It wasn't a real productive hunting dog for me because, again, I'm a foot hunter. During that time, I also was staying in a bed and breakfast. I'd never heard of a German wire-haired pointer, but I was staying in a bed and breakfast, and these people had two, and they were just great. They were beautiful dogs. They were great. He had them up on this funny thing we now know as a training table, right? And he was
Right.
moving on force fetch with them, and I just fell in love with the dogs. And sure enough, after my pointer passed away, I went out and found myself a good wire hair breeder. And when I was buying the dog, this is getting to NAVHDA here. When I was buying the dog, the breeder said to me, "Timmy, I'd really like to see you do something with this dog." And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to hunt him." And he goes, "No, that's not what I mean. I'd like to see you do something with him, like, join NAVHDA, which I'd never heard of before, or, the VDD club, the Deutsche Drahthaar Club. Do something with the dog so you get this dog trained to its potential." And, I didn't really have any intention of doing that. But, I took the dog home, and I was riding the dog one day, about 10 weeks old, and a guy pulls up in a truck. And he said, "Hey, that looks like a NAVHDA dog." I said, "Yeah, not really. I don't know. I'm just running my dog." Anyway, this guy turned out to be one of my very best friends. Still, we're very close. And he asked me to come and join him and some people at the next NAVHDA training day. And so I did. And I'm really glad that I did, because when I showed up, this guy, I'm talking about Glenn Basco, he was training with someone else, another good friend of mine, Tim Clark, and they were training for the Invitational. Now, this was something to me that I've never seen anything like this. The dogs were slamming points. They were slamming backs, right? Retrieving beautifully to hand. I mean, the points were out of this world. And I watched that and I said, "Yes, this is what I want." And I was thinking, if I join NAVHDA in 6 months, I'll have my dog doing that.
This is your first training day, and you're
Yeah,
watching two handlers that are training for the Invitational.
that's correct. Yeah. And
That's what they're all like, right?
yeah, sure. And I was just blown away, obviously. So, but that just again shows, how naive we can all be at the very beginning. And that is, I was thinking, geez, 6 months, maybe a year, my dog will do this. And of course, I did wind up running that dog at the Invitational. It was 6 years later, but it wasn't 6 months. But so that's how I got into NAVHDA, and I really enjoyed it. I just love the camaraderie. Basically everything that I'm sure you and most other people that are listening, who are members of NAVHDA, that we all love the same thing, and that's not just getting a better trained dog, which is obviously the key element, but the camaraderie, people helping
Absolutely.
you helping them, and
It's the
that's
people.
so I stuck with it, and I held a variety of positions at sort of the local chapter level. Then I was asked to serve as the director of publications for NAVHDA International I guess back in 2017. Did the magazine, the website, and our social media stuff up until last year when I ran for president. And I ran unopposed, but I won. So, so
It's
that's
still a
good.
win.
Yeah, that's a win's a win. So I'm enjoying it very much. So that's a long-winded answer to a very simple question.
Well, that's a great answer. What do you think is the biggest difference between NAVHDA when you started, 25, 30 years ago and now?
So this is a great question, and I can tell you from my experience what the differences are. Um, I'm not going to speak, sort of for the organization in general, but I can tell you that other people have the same sort of feelings that I just from talking with them. NAVHDA for me was a very welcoming experience for the most part at the beginning. There were very few women, very few kids involved in NAVHDA. It was all basically, guys that look like you and me out
Sure.
there doing training. And now this changed in a lot of ways. We have far more women in NAVHDA now. A lot of new youth memberships going up. This is an interesting statistic, actually. Since 2021, NAVHDA membership has grown only about 2.4%. But of that growth, the number of kids and women who is just extraordinary. So we have a 9% increase in youth, a 20% increase in female members, and almost a 30% increase in spousal members. So what this tells me is that NAVHDA chapters are making the NAVHDA experience a welcoming experience so that people are more willing to join than maybe they were in the past. Certainly, people who were typically underrepresented in NAVHDA are now joining at a higher rate, which is great. The other statistic that is really interesting is that life membership has increased almost 30%, as has membership renewals. A lot of people join, and like any organization, people quit after a year or two sometimes. Our membership renewals are up 23% since 2021. So what that says to me anyway, is that people not only really want to join NAVHDA because they see it as a real value, number one, and real learning experience two, and a camaraderie experience three. But they also, once they join, they want to stay, which is great. So our membership numbers have actually increased dramatically. We're up to almost 11,000. We're around 10,500 members right now, and it's almost doubled since 2017. So this last 7, 8 years has just been a time of really unprecedented growth.
Wow, that's awesome. And when you talked about a little bit about the diversity within the NAVHDA chapters, and it kind of got me thinking, if I were to guess off the top of my head right now, I'd say that maybe 30% of our chapter here, the White Creek chapter in Columbus, Indiana, is female.
That's great. I'm happy about that. I'm not surprised, but I can tell you that 27 years ago, that's not the way it was.
No, I would say not.
I mean, we had female members. We have long-standing female members who are have been very successful training and testing their dogs. I'm not saying that we didn't have any female members. We did, but the numbers have increased dramatically, and I think that's a great thing.
I think what's interesting too about women as trainers and as handlers, I think they look at their dog a little bit differently than most men do. We, in my experience, and in my limited experience, we bring a little bit of bravado to the training field. I don't, maybe you've seen that. Um, but I also think we're a little bit narrow-minded sometimes when we look at our dogs and what we think that they should be doing. We have a tendency to be very task-focused.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the women that I've seen as handlers and have trainers take a more holistic approach to their time in the field on that day. I've also noticed that some of the women, based off of just interactions and reactions to some of my social media posts, value different traits within their hunting dogs than a lot of men. A lot of men are focused on field work,
Mhm.
hunting aptitude, and that's it. What I've gotten from responses from women is that hunting aptitude is only a very small part of temperament, and that trainability is a bigger, probably more important part of that. And then also that the conformation, that the actual form of the dog, as breeders and as trainers, form leads to function, even though form follows function from
Mhm.
an evolutionary standpoint. But as breeders, I think we are kind of evolving the dogs, but we're also trying to keep that breed standard, to maintain that breed
Mhm.
standard. So we
Mhm.
breed to a form in order to support the function that we as hunters, as trainers, as handlers expect.
So there's some interesting observations you made there. Can you say that you've learned something from some of the women you've trained with? I certainly hope so, because we ought to be learning from everyone that we're interacting with. So
The most important mentor that I have in my entire dog world is Michelle Wilbers, who
oh,
runs
sure.
and manages Brushdale Kennel.
Hmm.
And she is a wealth of knowledge. She's been breeding dogs and training dogs. Breeding mostly. She's not a professional trainer. She knows way more about training than I know. For 25 years, started out with short hairs and made the jump over to small Munsterlanders about 17 years ago, I think.
Hmm.
Tremendous wealth of knowledge.
You mentioned briefly breeders and their goal to maintain the standard and also improve the breed, and that's so important. I mean, I view breeders as really, one of the primary sort of backbones of the organization. Without breeders, really putting the time and effort into achieving one of NAVHDA's goals, which is improving the versatile hunting breeds, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are today. So my hat's off to the breeders, to all breeders in NAVHDA who are doing such a great job of improving the breeds. I mean, test scores have gone up reliably over the last 30 years. Um, and the dogs are better. I mean, I can tell you that even in NAVHDA's been around since 1969. I joined in around 2000, I think it was. So they were on a lot longer than I was a member. But I can tell you that even in my short time in the 30 years, 25 years, um, I've noticed that there are a lot more really great dogs and now than there used to be. And again, that's due to one thing and one thing only: the quality of people breeding in the NAVHDA system.
Or it's got to start somewhere.
Yep.
So, what dog are you currently running now?
So I have two wire hairs and a short hair.
Okay.
I was always a wire hair guy. I love them, still love them, but I'm mostly a genetics guy. I mean, I come from a science background, and I have reasonably good handle on genetics, and I just this is how I picked out my other two dogs too. Was basically as a judge, you get to travel and see a lot of dogs, and I've seen some really, really, really great dogs, and I've just been fortunate enough to be able to introduce myself and meet these breeders and then get dogs out of the dogs that I was really impressed by. My current short hair, my wire hair guys say I went to the dark side. And I said, yeah, I really went to the dark side because he's a black short hair. So he's a wonderful dog out of Sharpshooters Kennels. Clyde Better has done a marvelous job of establishing a great line of dogs at Sharpshooter Kennels. And I've known his dogs for years. Obviously, I knew the parents, and I knew this breeding was taking place. And I was fortunate enough to get in on the list and get the dog, one of the most talented dogs I've ever owned, maybe the most talented raw natural talent dog that I've ever owned. And he's doing well.
I think for a long time, short hairs were more or less the ubiquitous dog of the versatile world of NAVHDA. It seemed like we saw more short hairs in NAVHDA and in walking trials than probably any other breed. I think we're starting to see a lot more poodle pointers. At least I've noticed in our chapter, and at the last test that I did was an NA test with my Munster, and I bet half the field was poodle pointers in that test.
It's interesting you raise that point. So currently, short hairs are the most there are more short hairs registered in NAVHDA than any other breed. That wasn't always true. In fact, at NAVHDA's beginning in 1969, early 70s into the mid 70s, the overwhelming number of dogs were wire hairs, poodle pointers, and short hairs were way down the list. It's really interesting. And poodle pointers then wound up taking a back seat for reasons not totally clear to me. Poodle pointers are wonderful dogs. To the short hair, which now sort of dominates, at least in a numbers perspective, our registry.
Every time I tell, I have the two dogs. I have the small Munsterlander and I have the poodle pointer. And every time I mention either one of them to people, what's the big black dog? Oh, he's a poodle pointer. A poodle what?
Yeah.
Is that
Sure.
like a Labradoodle?
Yeah.
Goodness, I will.
Yeah, I've heard people do it quite a bit.
So, what are the plans for the three?
Two have VCs already. They went in for those of you that are familiar with NAVHDA, our premier test, the highest level test that NAVHDA offers is called the Invitational. And when a dog passes that, he or she gets the title of Versatile Champion, or VC. I've had 3 wire hairs that passed the Invitational, and I'm running my short hair this year. So basically, my wire hairs are they're pets and they're hunters, and my short hair is basically the same, but he's also in some heavy training right now.
And how old is the short hair?
3.
3 years old, and he's going to the Invitational.
I'm sorry, he's gonna be 4 when he runs the Invitational. We ran the Invitational last year, had a great run, did not pass, and there was one reason we didn't pass. It had nothing to do with the dog. It was all about me. So this is the way that the tests normally go, right? If you don't do as well as you hoped, it's not because of the judges, and it's usually not because of the dog. It's almost always because of you. And it takes a little while to get used to that. But I can tell you flat out that we would have passed this year with a very, very, very respectable score if I had not made a terrible handler error at the double mark retrieve. We're trying again, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, good luck to you. So how many times have you run in the Invitational?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
Do you still get nervous?
Listen, I get nervous before an NA test.
Me too.
Yeah. The nerves of NA test are, I mean, I've run 25 of them, something like that. So I don't get super nervous about an NA test, but yes, I do. I do get nervous before the Invitational, because, the Invitational is not like an NA test or utility test where if you don't do well this week, you can get in one next week, right? This is something you have to qualify for the year before. You have to get a prize 1 in a utility test to be invited to the Invitational. And the Invitational, without going into a lot of detail, is a very complex, the demands on the dog and on the handler are extreme. And it's a one-shot deal, basically, unless you want to requalify and run 2 years later. So yeah, I do. I get nervous. I also judge the Invitational, and I don't get, when you run a dog, especially in the Invitational for me, but utility and NA is the same way. There's a component that's nerves, and there's a component that's just adrenaline. And I love the adrenaline part about running. Judging the Invitational, especially judging the field in the Invitational, I mean, this is one of the favorite things that I do in my entire life. It's just a pure, number one, kind of adrenaline rush. You've got to be on constantly, and you see some really, really great dog handler combinations. So I get nervous and an adrenaline rush when I run, and I get an adrenaline rush when I judge. So
I bet. I think just watching those dogs work together, performing, dogs and handler performing at that level, really peaking by way of cooperation and dog overall temperament and aptitude, it's got to be pretty impressive. I've never seen an Invitational. I do plan on heading out to Iowa this year to volunteer, whatever I need to do to be able to get a glimpse of it.
Yeah, I urge everyone who's interested in just dog work, even if you don't really have a strong or even an interest at all in running the Invitational, go out and see one. As you know, and as anybody who's listening who's a member of NAVHDA knows, we're basically a grassroots volunteer organization. And, tests don't happen unless we have people that are willing to give up their time and run it, and also people who are willing to help. And the Invitational is a big test. This year, I think it's going to be a 5-day test all day long with several different venues, and we need a lot of help. So I'm glad to hear that you're going out to help this year, and your help will be greatly appreciated. And those of you who may have a passing interest in the Invitational, I would again urge you to go and volunteer and just see what it's like, because you're going to see some dogs and some dog work that's just going to blow your mind.
Getting back around to your experience as a judge, did your observations of all the dogs that you judged, did that lead you to short hairs in general, or to one specific short hair from a specific pairing or from a specific breeder? How did that work out?
So this is interesting. I mean, choosing a dog is sort of, to me anyway, from my perspective, kind of a two-step process, right? The first thing you want to do is decide on a breed that interests you. And I went with wire hairs, and that's usually almost always, for most of us anyway, kind of a subjective thing. You saw somebody's dog and it was a great dog and you fell in love with it. That's certainly, how I came to have an interest in wire hairs. And then once you sort of choose your breed of interest, then you kind of narrow it down to a breeder. And NAVHDA, by the way, I just want to throw this out there, has the world's largest searchable database on dog testing in the world. Every single dog that's been tested in NAVHDA since 1969 is in our database, and any member, can go into our database and search that database. We have a registry database as well that's tied to it. So getting back to your original question, this particular dog, I think, as you described, was or laid out as an option, was basically this. I was interested in this dog because I knew the dog's parents. I know the breeder, who has just a remarkable history as being both a great breeder and just a gifted trainer. And I knew that if I was going to get a dog, any breed, who was going to excel, it was going to be from this breeding. It sort of runs counter to this idea that you have this subjective kind of, you're drawn to this particular breed and you're going to stick with it forever. And a lot of people do. But again, I like the wire hair breed, but I'm basically a scientist who likes genetics and data. And the data led me to buy that dog.
So it was the breeder and the pairing that led you to that puppy?
That's correct.
And did you get it? You got it as a puppy, at 8 to 9 week old puppy?
I did, 8 weeks, yes.
8 weeks old, little tiny puppy.
Yeah.
Nothing better than a little puppy.
No.
Out at Pheasant Fest, you got to see a ton of them.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking. Fortunately, I've already got a plan for another one, so I can be patient.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the NAVHDA database and the information that pretty much any NAVHDA member has at their fingertips. Can you describe how we can use that?
Sure. So there are two separate databases. One is the testing database, and the other is the registry pedigree database. And they're linked, right? So if you want to search the lineage of any dog that's a member of NAVHDA, that's registered with NAVHDA, you can go onto our registry database website, and it's a search. There are some search functions in there. You choose the date range. You can select by dog's name, breeder's name. You can actually search registries by breeder, etc. And if you're interested in a specific dog and the lineage of that dog, you can just type in that dog's information, and our database will automatically generate for you a lineage going back as far as there are dogs related to that dog registered in NAVHDA. And I say that it's linked to the testing database, and by that I mean, although they're separate databases technically, when you do a pedigree search, and you generate the lineage of any particular dog, you will also get the test scores of the dogs in that lineage, assuming they ran a test. So this is an underappreciated benefit of being a NAVHDA member. One of the things that we hope to do in the future is to make the data search a little bit more streamlined. So anybody that's done it knows that while it's an extremely powerful tool, it can also be sort of clunky. It doesn't have contemporary aesthetics, right? It looks like an old website, and it looks like an old search page, and there's a reason for that, because it is. So So what we're looking to do is here in the near future is to not change the database itself, but make it a little bit more user friendly, streamlined, and hopefully get more members interested in using it.
Right on. I know I've used the database several times, mostly out of curiosity.
Mhm.
A few times in research for this podcast, and I found it pretty easy to use. I think
Yeah,
if you have the time and the patience, all the information that you need is right there. It's a
yeah,
matter of combing through it.
it's very, very powerful.
Are we at 32 versatile breeds, recognized versatile breeds in NAVHDA right now, or is it 31?
We're 32 breeds at this point. Yeah.
What's the process for a breed to be nominated and then approved as a recognized versatile breed?
Yeah, we just basically apply. We don't get a lot of applications. Any dog that's considered a versatile dog, at least by NAVHDA, they're all continental breeds. In other words, they were bred, originally anyway in Europe. Now, obviously, there's a lot of breeds that were originally European are being bred here. But that's the origin, and these are dogs, versatile dogs in NAVHDA are dogs that need to search for in a way that's compatible with a foot hunter, point and track and retrieve game. And so all of the dogs, all of the registered breeds, in one way or another, they point birds. So while there are a variety of really fantastic dogs, obviously, Labradors, for example, great dogs, but they're not eligible to join now because they're not pointing breeds. Pretty much all of the breeds that I can't imagine, I don't know of any breed that would apply to become a NAVHDA registered breed off the top of my head. The one that we did add last year, basically it's just an application process. I
Okay.
submitted to the director of registry, Lisa Pure, and she can guide you through that process.
So how does NAVHDA continue to grow as an organization?
Well, I hope NAVHDA continues to be a welcoming environment for everyone who has sort of a like-minded interest in hunting upland game and waterfowl. An organization is only as particularly a totally volunteer organization is only as strong as its membership. And we've been blessed, I think, to have a lot of chapters and a lot of people who are extremely passionate about NAVHDA drawing new people in. But then those new people come, they stay, and they become the passionate members who then draw other people in. And I travel a lot for NAVHDA. I judge a lot. I do some seminars, and I'm always struck everywhere I go by just the atmosphere at any NAVHDA event, test, seminar, annual meeting, that sort of thing. Just the camaraderie and the compatibility of people who come from all different walks of life. And I hope that NAVHDA continues to expand in those ways. There are other more sort of technical things that I know that we're going to do here pretty soon, and that is to make some IT upgrades. So we've done a lot of IT upgrades behind the scenes. If you've been to the NAVHDA store over the last couple of years, you know that it's a pretty dismal looking place. We're outsourcing a lot of our apparel. It's going to expand the options for members. And so we're totally revamping the store, I guess what I'm trying to say. The other really exciting thing is that we're developing a member portal. So in other words, what that means is that members are going to be able to log in to the website. They'll have their own little area of the website that lists their dogs. From your own page on the website, you can automatically generate test entries and have them sent to test secretaries. You can post pictures of your dogs, etc. So it's also going to give you access to members only section. Currently, the NAVHDA member directory, the member list is actually open to anybody on the planet right now. It's not member restricted. We're going to make several pages, including the member registry, the member list and the judges list, sort of behind a wall so that only members can see it. There's some discussions about doing that for the database as well. I don't know where that's going to land, whether we're going to keep the database members only or not. We'll see. So that's an exciting new development for the future. I really want to expand too on the success that we've had in bringing members at large into decision-making positions in NAVHDA, right? So over the past 6 or 8 years, we've developed and/or expanded a number of committees, and the bulk of the members of these committees are not members of NAVHDA's executive committee, but rather members just like you. An example is the Judging and Testing Committee. We have a big Judging and Testing Committee that's responsible for evaluating apprentice judges, making any potential changes in the tests, et cetera. Very, very busy committee. I think it's an 11-member committee, and 10 of the members are, members just like you. Any member could apply to become a member of the Judging and Testing. We have other committees like that as well. The Registry Committee, the Invitational Committee, which is a tremendous committee, is composed mostly of people who just have expressed an interest in the Invitational. So we've been really, really successful over the last 5 or 6 years in bringing in more people and hearing what the members want through recruiting them to be on committees. We've also learned a lot from the membership through our annual member surveys. I don't know if you've read about the strategic plan. We had a strategic plan developed in 2019, which was based exclusively on member input that we got through surveys, meetings with presidents, and a special session at the 2019 annual meeting. As president now, I'm sort of revising the strategic plan for the next 4 years. And the overarching goals are going to be the same, but what we've done successfully is gotten some really great ideas from members through their responses on these surveys. And our new managing director, Kim Arnett, who, if you haven't met her, I urge you to give her a call. She's wonderful. She's been a real boon to this organization. And the reason that I mentioned Kim is because Kim Arnett has begun quarterly meetings with chapter presidents. And I typically go to these meetings. Turnout varies between 12 and 50. But those have been really, really productive meetings. What we typically do is we'll send out presidents a set of questions and ask them to discuss these questions with the membership, and then come back so that they can be representatives of the members of their chapter and let us know how they think NAVHDA can be improved, what they think members need that we're not aware of, et cetera. And again, those have been tremendously helpful. And I can tell you that based on member input, we've developed a lot of programs now that meet the members' needs. So I'll give you just a couple of examples, if you don't mind. One is the Training Seminar Assistance Program. Training Seminar Assistance Program provides typically new or smaller chapters with financial incentives to bring in professional trainers to help expand training knowledge of chapter members. I talked about the increase in our membership earlier, and it has been dramatic. Up until recently, the growth in chapters didn't come close to the growth in members. So chapters were getting overloaded. And what we heard from a lot of chapter presidents and just a lot of people through our annual surveys was that what they really wanted was more chapters and chapters that are closer. So what we started a couple of years ago is the new chapter support program. One of the problems with chapters starting up is that it's just, you don't know how to do it, and it can be expensive, buying equipment, et cetera. So now this established this new chapter support program, which provides both financial incentives and educational incentives to new chapters. And it's very easy to apply for. All of these applications are on the web. In concert with the new chapter support program, we've developed the chapter mentor program. Now, everybody knows that there are some chapters and some members that have been around for a long time and they know a lot, and other chapters that are newer have new people and they maybe they're unfamiliar with how you organize a training day, or how do you apply for a test to be held on your grounds, et cetera. Where do I get birds? Who keeps the birds? How do you pay for birds? That sort of thing. And these are all sort of questions that we, as longtime members of chapters, we just sort of know it by rote at this point. But new chapters, they need some help. And so the chapter mentor program has been tremendously successful in providing knowledgeable people, the access to really knowledgeable people for these new chapters. So it's been great. These are all programs that were developed in response to members' expressing desires and needs.
New chapter support program has been it's extremely valuable. New members often don't know what they don't know. They bring a level of naivety, or I can use the term ignorance in its truest sense, that you don't know what questions to ask often. And you and I both know it's not as simple as calling up the quail guy, going to buy a bunch of quail, bringing them out to a field, setting them out and shooting them, because the conservation officer might just show up and ask, are we doing the right thing here? Let's see your is your training ground approved? Let's look at these quail. Where'd you get them from? Where's your receipt? Right? There's a lot that goes along with that, and it's such a simple little thing that could get you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's true. And people, these new chapters need guidance in so many ways. Both of those programs have been designed to help chapters in just that way.
So we keep hearing the rumors about changes with the testing. And I know that there have been no decisions made 100%. Can you get into what's driving the changes with UPT?
So this is a great question. These discussions are really just in their infancy. So I don't have anything real substantive to say about specific changes that may or may not happen. We may not change them. You're talking about the UPT test. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the UPT test, NAVHDA offers 4 levels of testing. The 2 most frequently run their dogs in are the NA test, that stands for natural ability. And these are all dogs that are 16 months or younger. And basically you have to have your dog swim, track a pheasant, and search for birds and point them. In 2023, we had 2,506 dogs run natural ability last year. The UT test, the utility test, is a more advanced test. And we had about 1,000 dogs run utility last year. Utility, again, without getting into a lot of detail, is just an upper level test. Dogs have to search and point game. Obviously, they're expected to be steady to wing shot and fall. They need to retrieve to hand and do some water work, retrieve a duck, show that they can be steady by a duck blind, and then do a duck search, which is a test of a dog's ability to track and locate a wounded duck. So it's one of the things that NAVHDA prides itself on is the extent to which our tests mimic real life hunting situations. And I think the utility test is a great example of that, particularly the duck search. I mean, how many times have you been duck hunting? You put a bird down, it's not dead, and it kind of paddles, kind of swims away, and you've got to get that bird back. This is exactly what we're training dogs in duck search. So those are our 2 most frequently taken tests. Another one is the invitational, which I spoke about briefly earlier. Really, only about 150 people take the invitational every year. The test in between natural ability and utility is called utility preparatory test, or the UPT test. And as the name implies, this is sort of a gateway to the utility test. And without going into details of every aspect of the UPT test, it's very similar to the utility test, except that dogs don't need to be steady so they can break at the shot. The standards for retrieving are a little bit lower, and the duck search is a little bit different. So back to your original question, is it going to be changed? And if so, sort of what's driving that? So the answer is, I don't know if it's going to be changed. We're talking about it. Last year, barely over 100 people ran the UPT test. And I don't really know why. We don't have any data on why, but I've talked to a lot of people about what they're doing after NA. And typically what we have 2 groups of people after NA. They're really stoked about NAVHDA and they just want to run utility tests, or they see the utility test and are really intimidated by it and drop. What we're trying to do is encourage chapters to mentor new members after the NA test. And, the reality is that if you stay at NAVHDA, there is some pressure to run your dog in the utility test. And, not everybody ought to feel like you got to run a utility test, right? The utility preparatory test is this, underutilized resource, and it's underutilized because people are running the utility test or they're leaving NAVHDA. So the impetus for potentially changing the UPT test is to make the transition from NA to UT more sort of palatable, make it more attractive. The UPT test, even the name, I think, it implies that the goal is to pass the utility test. And there are a lot of people who They want to join NAVHDA. They want a good hunting dog. They want to go out. They don't care if their dog breaks at the shot. If their dog, brings your bird back to within 3 feet of you and spits it on the ground, they're fine with that. And I totally get that, right? But you're not going to get that out of a dog that passes NA. So the reason that we're thinking about potentially changing some aspects of the UPT test is to cater to these people who have really great intentions, and they want to stick with the training and they want a better trained dog, but they don't want that commitment to go through this rigorous utility test.
You got me thinking too. So you've passed NA. Let's say you scored well and your dog scored well in NA. A lot of handlers, myself included, say, "All right, next year we're hitting up utility." With a lot of dogs, you have to ask, why does it have to be next year? You've got plenty of time with this dog. I think what a lot of people start doing, though, especially inexperienced handlers, and I'm guilty of this. Okay, I'm going to start getting ready for utility, so I'm going to start doing advanced field work, and then I'm completely screwed when it comes to duck search.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should be doing just the opposite. We should focus on duck search. Let the dog go do its thing. Let it figure out how to search, how to intelligently expand its search zone. If it does get a duck, bring it back to hand, go back out and search some more, which is not easy, I think, for a lot of dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we have that down and we know we can do that for 15 minutes flawlessly, then start reining the dog back in and start doing advanced field work.
So it's interesting you bring this up. There are a lot of different theories about the progression, what you ought to do first, what you ought to do second, et cetera. And I've tried a bunch of the different theories, and some work in my experience, and some don't. There's not many ways to skin a cat. What's worked for me, and what I've learned from some very gifted trainers, and consistent with what you were saying, get your dog steady to shot. Let it break at the shot so it's still supercharged. You can hunt over a dog that's steady to shot.
I did it all last fall.
Sure. And you know what? Even a dog that breaks at the shot. So he breaks at the shot, right? He's not steady to the shot, but he's steady to wing. So he breaks at the shot. It's not the end of the world, right? Instead of going from there to steady to wing, shot, and fall, and then duck search, what a lot of people, and certainly what I do, and this is not my idea, I've learned it from others, is that you get to the point where your dog is steady to wing at least. And then you go and train your duck search, and you've got a dog that's hard charging. That dog's hard charging because it's breaking at the shot, or it's breaking, after the shot to go get that bird, right? You want to take advantage of that drive, because that's what the duck search is all about. It's very, very different from the field search. They both have search in the name, but in the field search, the dog's working with you. There's a degree of cooperation that's required for both you and the dog to do well. The duck search is basically, it's a dog. And a dog, and a well-trained dog, or a dog with appropriate drive, they're going to go out there and love doing a duck search. Why? Because they're allowed to do exactly what it is they always wanted to do. And that is go out there, chase this bird down and grab it, right? So this is why it's a good idea, at least I think, and many other people think, to, don't fully steady your dog up until you're done with duck search. Now, I can tell you, if you do fully steady your dog up and then you start training duck search, it's going to screw up your field steadiness, right? Because what you just now trained the dog to do is exactly what you're asking him not to do in the field. And that's just go out there, be all on your own, and chase down this duck. So that's a long way of saying that I think I agree with you with respect to sort of the progression of steadiness to duck search.
The only reason I know that is because I was corrected. But that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
How is the format of the invitational different from UT?
So the invitational is in utility tests, dogs are run by themselves with their handler, obviously, for 30 minutes. The field portion of the invitational test is a 1-hour field run, and you're running with another dog. And your dog is expected to not only do what it did in the utility test, and that is search well, point, steady to wing, shot, and fall, really go retrieve on command, and then retrieve the hand. It's also expected to back. And for those of you that don't know what backing is, basically if a dog is on point and your dog is sort of running in, you can call him around and the dog comes in, As soon as the backing dog sees the dog on point, that dog's expected to stop and not screw up the pointing dog, right? So this is where a lot of people go out in the invitational. In other words, that people don't pass the invitational because their dogs just don't back properly. It's a very demanding test. Some dogs just back naturally, and if your dog backs naturally, good for you. Stick with it. Don't screw it up. But some dogs don't back naturally. There are ways to train that. But backing is really an important thing, not just for the invitational test. And I want to come back to this point that the invitational test is meant to replicate real life scenarios. And how often do you hunt alone? And I hunt alone reasonably frequently, but I prefer to hunt with one or two other people, right? And what you don't want your dog to do is to screw up another dog. And by that I mean run in, steal point, bust the bird, etc. And it's also just a thing of there's a sort of an etiquette aspect to it, and there's also just an aesthetic about it. I mean, just seeing a dog slam on the brakes because it sees another dog on point, it's just a thing of beauty. It really is. And it's important for safety in hunting as well. So that's one difference between the utility test and the invitational test. The field is much more rigorous. The standards for retrieving are higher. There's what's called a blind retrieve. So in a blind retrieve, you walk your dog up to a body of water, about 100 yards or so, 120 yards across, to typically an opening on the other side where a duck has been placed. Your dog didn't see the duck put there. There's just a duck there. And so what you do in the final stages or at the test is you'll walk up, you'll give your dog a line, basically show him with your hand or some other way what direction you want him to go, and then you send him. And the dog is expected to basically trust you and swim across this body of water, pick up the duck, swim back to you, directly back to you, and then retrieve the hand. This can be a long, rigorous process for some people and for some dogs, but it's just a real beautiful thing to see if your dog does it properly. Right after that, there's another aspect of the test called honor by blind. In this part of the test, you basically leave the blind and you heel about 50 yards away. And then you put your dog in a down, sit, or stand position, whatever you want. And there's a little circle painted on the ground. Your dog can't leave that circle. What you've also got is a dog next to you, or maybe 10 yards away, who's going to retrieve a duck. So your dog is standing there in the circle. We launch a duck. A shot is fired. The other dog goes and retrieves the duck in front of your dog, and then comes back to the retrieving dog's handler. So this puts a lot of pressure on dogs, right? I mean, there's a shot, there's another dog, there's competition, but this could well happen in a hunting blind, right? Your buddy shoots his bird and he's going to send his dog out to retrieve it, and your dog needs to stay there. That follows the blind retrieve, but you go directly from the blind retrieve to the honor by blind, and then that part is done. The final part is something that's similar to the utility test, where there's a retrieve of duck. There's a blind there, and the duck goes up. Your dog's expected to retrieve that. This part of the utility test is called the double marked retrieve. So in this case, you heel your dog up to the shore, to the edge of the water, and one duck goes up. It's called the memory bird or the long bird. It's about a 50 to 75 yard swim to the duck. That duck is launched first. And there's a second duck launched called the wiper bird, or the go-to bird. That bird is launched and it's supposed to basically cross over the dog's line of sight to the memory bird. So the memory bird may land to the dog's left, 75 yards out. The wiper bird or the go-to bird is going to land to the dog's left, maybe only 15 yards out. And so the dog must retrieve the go-to or the wiper bird first, the close bird first, which is in the opposite direction from the memory bird. It's called the memory bird for a reason. And that's because through all by the way, I didn't mention gunfire, but all the time the ducks are being launched, there are gunshots being fired. Your dog has to remember the location of that memory bird all through the frenzy of gunfire, retrieving another duck, etc. And then you heel them around, and then you give them a line and send them for that long bird. That's called the double marked retrieve, and we used to have a different. It's a new aspect of the test that's maybe, I'm going to say maybe 10 years old, something like that. So that's the invitational test, and it bears similarity to the utility test only in that dogs are expected to be steady to wing shot, fall, and retrieve to hand. Most of the other aspects of it are different from anything you would see in a utility test.
During the blind retrieve, are the handlers handling their dog, or is the dog expected to run out on the line and then search once it gets out to the location?
Exactly. Great question. So ideally what the dog is going to do is take the line that you gave it, swim directly across, pick up the bird, come directly back to you. So that's the ideal scenario. Does that happen always? No. Can you handle your dog? Yes. The expectation with handling is if you give your dog an over, and by that I mean, you can give it some either a verbal or typically a body language command that tells your dog either to no, I want you to go to the left, or no, I want you to go right. Or if the dog swims halfway across and turns around and looks at you and starts swimming back, you can give him a back command, which also is a verbal and a hand command. So the expectation is that if you're going to handle your dog and your dog takes those commands, it's not going to hurt your score. But if you handle your dog and your dog does not take those commands or not obey those commands, then it will. So handling is allowed, but as long as it's number one, not excessive, and number two, that your dog takes the command. Obedience is a huge part of the utility test and especially the invitational test. There's no question about it.
How many tests do you think you'll be judging for 2024?
I'll tell you what, I overdid it 2 years ago. I was gone 36 days, I think. I did 28 days of testing with travel. Some of them were 3-day tests. Some of them were, far out west. So I was doing a lot of traveling. I think I forget exactly how many tests it was, 11 or something. And so it was just exhausting. So, and then of course the invitational on top of that. So I told my wife and myself that next year, being last year, I wasn't going to do that. I was only going to judge 5 tests last year. And of course, people call you. So I wound up doing 7 or 8 last year, but not as many as I did the year before. And this year I'm cutting back. This year I'm limiting myself. I'm doing 5 tests, and I'm doing an invitational clinic this year. So I'm really kind of cutting back, mainly because I'm also training for the invitational, right? So you don't want to be away 2 weekends a month while you've got a dog to train.
You got to take advantage of that time, right?
Well, the thing that I hope people understand, that NAVHDA judges are there really for 2 reasons. One is obviously to evaluate your dog, and the other is to help you get the most out of your dog, right? There is nothing that would make a judging team happier than to see everybody go away at the end of the day with the maximum score possible. So when judges are out there, they're really out there to help you. The other thing that I hope people understand is that when judges are out judging maybe a 3-day test of your chapter, what they're doing is taking 3 days out of their family time. They'll take vacation days to go out and judge. You may have to leave on a Thursday to judge on a Friday. Judges are just like anybody else in NAVHDA. They're volunteers. They're out there. You don't get paid to judge. You meet a lot of fantastic people and you see a lot of fantastic dogs. But if you're a handler and or a helper, and at the end of the day, I would urge you just to go over and thank the judging team, because they're out there for you, not just to evaluate your dog, but they're out there to help you get the best score possible.
Absolutely. I know we appreciate our volunteer judges. And the only NAVHDA test that I've participated in was NA with my small Munsterlander. And if I remember correctly, we had a total of 5 judges at the test because we had 2 apprentice judges.
Yeah.
But getting feedback at the end of the day from 5 different people was really helpful for me, even though she maxed the test, but I know she did not have a perfect performance. And being a pretty new trainer and handler, I had a lot of questions at the end of that test.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the judges handle those questions. All judging teams instruct handlers to listen. Don't leave today without asking if you have a question in your head, come up and ask it. We all hate for people to be driving home going, man, I wish I would have asked him why I got a 3 in tracking. So never hesitate to ask questions about how you did, even if you did really well. And you actually raised a very interesting and important point, and that is that your dog got a 112. And that's the maximum score possible. This doesn't mean that your dog is perfect, right? Some dogs go out and slam that test, and they simply couldn't be any better. But NAVHDA's scoring system, for those of you that don't know, is basically on your dog gets a 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's sort of a low resolution kind of scale, really. So you can think of it, and this is a rough estimate. It don't hold, you can't really hold anybody to this percentage concept, but you can think of a dog getting a 1 is that the dog did 25% or less of the work. A dog that got a 2 in some event did 50%, 26 and 50%, et cetera. A 3, 51 to 75%, and a 4, 75% or above. So you could theoretically get all 4s and have a dog that was, getting, 80% of the work done on all aspects of the test. The other thing that I want to mention here, sort of related, is that there is a lot of personal pressure. People put a lot of pressure on themselves and sometimes feel pressure from other chapter members that if you don't get a prize 1, your dog's no good. And this is just a really, it just breaks my heart to see people leave a test with a really, really fantastic dog. They may have gotten a prize 2 or a prize 3 that day, and they just leave dejected. Listen, if you get a dog that prizes in any NAVHDA test, and you go out to public land with, people who don't train, your dog, the prize 3, prize 2, or prize 1 is going to be leaps and bounds better than 90% of the dogs out there. So I understand. Listen, I put pressure on myself, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. But if I go out and I test and I don't get a prize 1, or I don't pass the invitational, it hurts because I didn't get what I want. But it's important to take a step back, I think, for all of us, and recognize that really, what's most important in what we do is not getting a particular prize, but building a bond, a lasting bond with your dog, and getting yourself a dog that you can hunt with, right? I don't need to have an invitational dog to go out and have a ball hunting in Nebraska, right? I can have a prize 3 UPT dog and go out there and have a really fantastic dog and a really fantastic time. So I'm just throwing that out there to try and ground both myself and anybody that's listening who's married to this idea of it's a prize 1 or nothing.
Absolutely. And, there are so many variables that we can't control on test day. There are so many variables that often the chapter can't control. If they don't own, or a chapter member doesn't own the training ground, sometimes things get mowed when it's not ideal for things to get mowed. And that might affect tracking in NA. Sometimes it's 10 degrees with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and puppies might be on the struggle bus
Sure.
with that. This is my experience with our NA test, where that the field got mowed unbeknownst to anybody on the chapter. When they showed up there, I think the chapter was a little bit disappointed. It was cold. It hadn't rained in, I don't know, weeks probably, and it was super windy, and we're testing puppies on it, and they did fine. Most of them did fine on field work. They struggled on tracking, and there were a bunch of puppies that blinked the water entry. They just said, I'm not doing it. It's too cold.
Yeah, I get it. You mentioned mowing. I was at a test in Connecticut one time when we were doing tracks in a hayfield. And this wasn't like a small farm or hayfield. This was like one of these industrial hay farms where they go in with tractor trailers, and they drive the tractor trailers next to a thing that's cutting the hay and throwing it up into the tractor trailer. Well, we're running tracks, and here they come. And they don't give a darn about us running dogs, right? They're coming in there, they're cutting that hay, and you better get out of the way, or you'll wind up the tractor trailer. So we had to pack up and leave and find another tracking field for the next 5 dogs. So but this getting back to your point, stuff happens. It's just a test. There's going to be another one.
All right, Tim, I've taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate you being on here. Can you give me a closing thought?
Well, I really appreciate having me. For one, closing thought. Hunt your dog. Listen, it's easy to get wrapped up in training. It's easy to get wrapped up in fall testing, etc. But you got to keep your eye on the prize here. And what the prize is to be able to go out and enjoy your dog in upland hunting and waterfowl hunting, etc. The testing system can take on a life of its own and be the end goal. In my view, it's just my view, the testing should not be the end goal. It should be a step toward the end goal, which is going out with your dog and your buddies and shooting some birds.
And then where can people find you if they wanted to reach out to you?
Any member of the board can be reached through the NAVHDA website. Go to contact us. I am always open to questions. I urge people in every one of my president's messages, and certainly when I give talks or give seminars, etc., I urge people just to contact me directly. If you have any questions, you can contact me. You can contact Kim Arnett, our managing director, who's also on the contact page. If you have a question specific to judging or testing, you can contact the directors of judging, the director of testing. If you have a registry question, Lisa Pure is our registrar. You can call or email her. And all members of the EC are very responsive to people's questions. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to me or really anyone in NAVHDA to answer your questions. Or you know what? Even if you don't have a question, if you have a comment, you want to tell me something's really good, that's great too. You want to tell me something, this really stinks about NAVHDA, and I got to let you know. Call me about that too, because I want to hear those things.
All right, Mr. President, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Bill.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed episode number 6 of the Whoa Post. And my biggest takeaway, it's something that I think we all need to remember from time to time, is that the bond with our dog is more important than our dog's test scores. Remember, you can always contact me on Facebook or Instagram at The Whoa Post or through email bill@thewhoapost.com. Stay steady and God bless.